Hi everybody, how you doing? I'm Ethan Felizzari-Castillo and we are here at the CK Café and I'm joined today by my good friend Mateo Marquez. How you doing, my friend?
Good, good. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, man. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself, about who you are, about what you've done.
I'm a writer and director based here in New York City. I've done short films, music videos, a lot of branded content pieces, and yeah.
Man, yeah, we know each other because we worked on the first two projects that I ever worked on. I know you probably have made some other things, but La Sangre was the first ever.
I think we also worked on...
oh, we worked on something else too.
The Teen Wolf thing.
Yeah, we did a very interesting, by our friend Theo Tiedemann, shout out Theo. We made
Where Ethan acted.
Yeah, I did act. I acted and I was producing it. And it was a Teen Wolf, like prequel, fan-made prequel
I don't even
series.
remember my role in that thing.
I think you were the DP, maybe?
Maybe. That's probably accurate.
I think that's what it was. And I think that was the actual first thing I'd ever done in film. But it hadn't come out yet, nothing. Mm-hmm. We were just like shooting random scenes whenever we could. Because it was all just friends kind of doing favors. And then you and I had talked about, I think soccer. I think that's how we got in the conversation. Because I know you like Real Madrid.
Yes.
A Drift fan, man. Crazy. And I think that's why we said, oh, cool. Yeah, and then you're Latino, I'm Latino, and we started talking, I had this conversation, and then you sent me the first 4 pages of La Sangre, Nuestras Venas.
Really?
I'm never gonna forget it. I read the first 4 pages, you sent it to me through Facebook Messenger.
I don't even remember writing that short film.
You don't remember writing it?
I don't remember writing it.
I feel like I remember every
I know I wrote
single
it, but
thing
I
about
just don't remember like the actual process or like sharing it with anybody. I just remember being on set.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I remember on set for sure. I remember the whole thing. You sent me the film, you sent me 4 pages, and you said, this isn't done, don't judge it, or something like that, but you're like, just read it and tell me if you like it.
Wow.
And then I said I loved it, and I was like, I'm interested to see where the story goes, because it's a very compelling story. And the pages you sent, I don't think were actually the first 4 pages of the script, but it was just 4 pages in general of like an idea. And I remember you sent me the full script later on, and then we just hopped into production like right away. We had very few. We did
an Indiegogo campaign. I think we raised like $1,000. It was
It was only 1,000 for sure, because that budget for that film was pretty small.
It was like I think 2K after all was said and done, like because we did the sound at a professional sound place.
Yeah. And
but they like gave me a discount because I paid in cash. But it was wow.
That film was, but you had a lot of friends on that film because you were in school at the time.
Yeah, I was still at Hunter, so a lot of people came on, and it was like this. It was my last or second to last year at Hunter. It was like because I had met the DP Mike Gioloretto at Able because I was getting the like intern credits or whatever.
Yeah.
And
he had the camera.
No, he didn't have the camera. That camera was wild too. That was like a Frankenstein camera. It was a friend of mine, Ernst's camera. He had just bought it. Okay. And then we like piecemeal together like a bunch of different lenses and a bunch of different body parts for that. Like I think it was like one of the early Reds. It was
a Red, but then I remember the build was crazy. It was just a bunch of random
wild
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You watch it again, and I think you show it to anybody who just, any random person, and they're gonna look at it and think this is a great looking film. Like it looks good.
Yeah. I've been lucky to have great looking films, and that it was interesting because at that point I had tried to make a short film and like 3 or 4 times and had never been able to finish one.
That's crazy.
Because I was like,
so that was your first one you ever finished?
Yep.
Oh wow.
That's why it was like such a huge accomplishment. Because the last night we did the party scene and it was just like, oh, we did it. I did it.
Yeah. Right. It was a big. I remember that whole everything. It was this.
It was in the summer, so that shoot went late because it gets dark late.
Yeah. And it was all shot in Queens, every single bit of it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Everything was in Corona, Queens, right?
Yeah. No, it was Corona, and then Richmond Hill, and then Jackson Heights, I guess.
Jackson Heights, yeah. It's beautiful too. Like that film still. I watch it every now and then. I'll stumble on it, or like I was telling you earlier. Like people will hit me up because they'll randomly see it like on our website or something, and they'll be like, "This film is beautiful. It's truly a great film." So I'm happy that it's like really sort of stood the test of time.
It was so interesting. I remember I got an email from some professor somewhere, some random professor at some random college in the country, and they said they had seen the film somewhere. Maybe it was online at that point.
Yeah.
And they had showed it. They wanted to ask my permission to show it to their class, and I think I said yes, but I thought it was just interesting the impact that it just had.
And it went to a ton of festivals. Like for a first time producer, filmmaker, director, writer, like to get into the amount of festivals that we ended up getting into was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like we got into some pretty good ones too. Some that were really interesting. You remember that one that we went to? I won't say the name of it, but the one we went to in that random town in Jersey.
It wasn't in Jersey.
Where was it?
It was in Connecticut.
Connecticut, you're right.
It was like
I remember driving through.
raining.
Dude, it was pouring that night.
Profusely raining.
And that I remember my brother took me and we went through this area that was just full on trees and it was so rainy that was just mud everywhere and there was no road. And we were like, where are we going? And then we ended up at like some small local theater. And it was interesting. It was an interesting experience.
We came like dressed up and everything
ready to go.
Because the festival programmer had told us that it was going to be like a huge event, a Q&A and everything. And so we thought like, okay, it's going to be like a real deal. And then we
really
came in as like 7 people in the movie theater.
Yeah, it was insane. And then they asked us like one question, I think. It was crazy. And then we were like, all right. And
that was funny.
I remember we talked outside and we were just like, okay. Well, you know what? At least we were there, whatever. Yeah. And it felt like it was a very interesting journey. I think that was the first festival too.
I don't remember.
I think it might have been.
Queen's World, I think that one was my favorite.
That was definitely my favorite because we were in that big, beautiful theater.
Yeah, and the private screening was also really cool.
Cinemond, yeah.
Yeah, Cinemond.
They still do those?
I have no idea.
Those are great. It was like very interesting. And they were both paired with really good features.
Yep.
Both of those festivals. Those are those are definitely my favorites. But yeah, we were in a bunch for like a first time filmmakers. I think it was an interesting experience. And then we did another film. It was your second short, Santi, which was a whole
great learning experience.
Great learning experience.
I'll say that.
There's a lot of things I learned on that set that taught me how to produce now. And that we shot that in 2016. Oh my goodness, 2016. That was a while ago. Very long time ago. So yeah, I think I still take from that set. There was so much that happened. Like camera broke. There's that sensor issue, right? Remember that huge spot that was there?
It was a line of dead pixels, yeah.
That was awful. And someone drove.
Yeah, they drove to get like my camera at my house. It was just a mess. It was a mess.
Dude, that was tough. It was tough. But you know what's interesting? I remember when you had a really interesting script for that one, which is why there's so many people involved in that one. There's a lot of producers. And Austin, Charlie, Arena, right? So we had a bunch of people that were involved. And it was like, I think the script was super tight, but then because of all of the on-set issues, it turned into something a little bit different. But I think the final product still came out. You know, it was an interesting.
I remember we ended up shooting on a Sony.
Yeah, we had to.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But not the first scene, right? The first scene we kept as is because we had already shot it.
Yeah.
We had moved on. It was the first scene, the opening scene with Rolando. And Tenzing, right? They were sitting there. It's a beautiful look, though. That first scene is gorgeous. That's, I think, what drew me into that film. Even I watched it recently. You had sent it to me recently, and I watched it.
I think that film failed because there's too many pieces.
Yeah.
And I wish I had kept it to one piece.
Yeah. The budget for that one was interesting, too, because that one we were working with a little bit more money.
Yeah, we definitely stretched it.
A little too much. Yeah.
Definitely stretched it.
My mom cooked some food for that, though. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, and your dad...
My dad was the driver and did all the equipment stuff. Yeah. My dad still does that to this day for me when we have shoots that require a driver. He comes, he brings his big van, his Mercedes Sprinter, same one that he had in 2016. He'll bring that, he'll pack it with gear and all that. So
nice.
Yeah. But since then, that was the last thing we worked on, was 2016 together. But since then, you've had some really, really cool shorts. One of my favorite shorts of yours is The Invaders. That's probably my favorite thing that I've ever seen of yours. What was that like making that? And can you tell a little bit about what it's about and you know, sort of your inspiration behind making a film like that?
It was a direct reaction to. It was the end of 2016.
Yeah.
We had just finished making Santi, and a man who should not be named gained control of the White House, and it felt like the whole world was coming to an end, or at least the world that we had been promised had been coming to an end. And there seemed to be like a rise of. It's interesting now thinking about it though, because I don't know if Islamophobia was even as potent as it was post 9/11 as it was when Trump was inaugurated.
Yeah.
But for at least for the age that I was, it felt like Islamophobia was really high.
Yeah.
When Trump was trying to do his whole like Muslim ban and all that stuff, and just saying a bunch of
crazy
Trump things in the media, whether he means them or not, no one ever really knows. But regardless, what you say has consequences. And I wanted to write a story about like a girl just being chased by a monster, and in the end, that monster being people. But I think The Invaders was essentially trying to ask the question, like, who are the actual invaders? Like, are the people that we persecute here or deem not worthy of American protection the invaders? Or are the invaders the government encroaching upon our freedom to sort of live differently than what they feel is the national security norm?
Yeah, it's a beautiful film, and I think you always do this really well with your films. That you have a really good grasp at like telling stories that I think matter and that are important, but in a very interesting way. And I think especially with your new work, like all of your new things that you have worked on and that I've seen of yours, like it knows the story that's trying to tell, but it does it in a way that's digestible for anybody. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes Invaders so cool. Like, it's a horror film. Like, it's at the end of the day. It's
we try to play up all the horror tropes on that one.
But you do it in such a way that it feels, I don't know, to me, like, I when I first saw that film, I was on the edge of my seat. And then, like, when you, like, the grand reveal at the end, or just, like, how you feel at the end, really what you take away from it, it's such a great way to tell that story, because so many people don't listen otherwise, right? It's like, I always find that anytime I'm writing too, like, or just making anything, I'm like, are people gonna care if I say it this way, right? Or like, if I say it this way, do I start polarizing this entire group of people that I'm hoping are gonna take something away from my film? And that happens. But that movie, you could show it to someone who, you know, is just an absolute crazy bigot, and I guarantee you they'll watch that movie and they'll take something away from it. And it's because you're not putting it outward in a way that I think some films do. And I think you just have such a good grasp at that. And like, it's never preachy. Like you know, I'm just gassing you up here, but like, but it was interesting. Do it in such a good way.
It's interesting that you say that, because I did show the film to somebody, and their reaction was like, she must have done something wrong.
That's crazy, really.
Mm-hmm. But I got that reaction a lot, that the girl must have done something wrong, and that she deserved that punishment in the end, which is, it's very interesting that.
That's insane.
Is it really though? Because like, I feel like we're going through it right now.
Yeah, you're right.
Not to get too political on it, but there's always going to be somebody who is being killed by a force that's bigger than them. And whether they deserve it or not is going to depend on who you ask.
It's insane. Yeah, I mean, what's going on in the world is just absolutely nuts. But I always felt, I like to say that.
And the complicit nature of people, I think, was another small factor that I put into the film, because I do feel like people, as long as they don't feel directly culpable, that they sort of wash their hands of it. And I don't know. I mean, just a lot of stuff right now in the world.
But I think one of the best things that people can do, especially people like us, is it's so easy to feel so helpless and hopeless. And like, you know, like, I mean, there's so many things you could donate to or whatever, but it's like, at the end of the day, like, to make real impact, I think we have to use the tools that we have, and you use your tool really well, which is storytelling. And I think it opens up people's eyes. And I know, it's not stopping what's happening in the world, but, just to start that conversation, I think is so important. Like one thing that Stephanie and I always try to do when we approach any new project is we try to say, what's the cause behind it? Like, what's the reason for making something like this, right? And especially now, I feel like, I don't want to say it's irresponsible because I enjoy movies of all kinds, but like, I think if you have a passion for telling stories with some sort of message, whether it be a political message or a statement you're trying to make on the state of our world, I think it's your responsibility to dive into that and make that thing, So like, if a short film, a feature, whatever it is, a music video, filming someone doing poetry, anything. But it's like, if you have the ability to do it, I think it's like almost your responsibility to do it in a weird way, And I think you handle it really well. You take it, I don't know, I think you just do it so well, man. That's why I love your work. So, on that same topic, I mean, one of the things that I know that you do a lot is you put immigrants into your stories, and specifically, I mean, a lot of the work that we've done together, and a lot of your work is in Spanish or, featuring Latin actors or Latin stories. So can you talk to me a little bit, I guess, why you like to do that besides just being Latino and that being your experience? Like, what's the reason why you like to feature immigrants and immigrant stories in the forefront?
I think the answer is the simplest answer. It's that I'm a Latino. I'm a son of an immigrant. There's a lot of immigrants in my family. There's still a lot of family of mine in Colombia. But it's just something I relate to, and it's part of the fabric of my world. And I can't separate the two when I write.
Yeah.
But I think there's an interesting story, interesting use of words that you use there, Latino stories. I don't know what that means anymore. Like, I don't know what Latino stories are.
Yeah.
And so I think of my stories as Latino stories, or at least from a Latino perspective, a Latino American perspective. But as to what, I don't know if my films would fall under that blanket statement of Latino stories. So I think my stories are more about people who happen to be Latino.
Yeah. That's something that I find so interesting is like, when we talked about like sort of the state of like film festivals and like the way they kind of perceive a Latin story. You have a film that you're in the festival process right now. Can you talk about some of the difficulties you've had, I guess? Because we had this conversation. I thought it was such an insightful conversation because you're right. Like Latino stories, what it means to us versus what it means to other people, especially non-Latin people, I think are two different things, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that being Latino is such a weird thing because it encapsulates like a variety of people who are different, who have different customs and cultures, all the way from being like the darkest dark to the whitest white.
Yeah.
And it's just such a gray culture, right? Like just like a Mexican is not the same as a Colombian or an Argentinian or someone from Guatemala, it's just they're so different, and their experiences are different, their cultures are different, their histories are different, and to sort of blanket statement everybody into one umbrella is sort of disingenuous. And like that, if your experience isn't what the categories of being Latino is, like speaking Spanish, eating certain things, or dancing, or being over sexualized or anything like that, then like it sort of diminishes it. And so my experience with my films has always been like, unless my thing falls under that sort of category, the story that I want to tell falls under that category, then I'm sort of like cast to the side as not being a Latino, telling a Latino story, even if my cast is fully Latino and my crew and everybody is Latino. That, I always make the same comparison to like Birdman or The Revenant, or Pinocchio. Like the people behind those films are all Hispanic. Their perspectives are all Hispanic.
Yeah.
And they're so the things that they've lived, the way that they think and the way they speak and the way that they express themselves
and tell that story.
Yeah,
it's going to
come
be from
from
that perspective. Yeah,
a Hispanic perspective. So I guess where does the line draw as to what is a Latino film and what is? I mean, in theory, we should all just like it's just film.
It's just a film. Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting though. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think, and you see that a lot with like executives and people, even in the indie film scene, like even just indie film executives and smaller production companies, like when they want to tell stories of Latinos or a specific group, you know, even if we're not saying Latin people, just a specific ethnic group, they want that story to be about like, I've noticed that be about that specific experience and like, oh, what is it like to grow up in a Latin household? And I think those stories are so important. I mean, they're great. Every time I see a story like that and it's done well, I'm like, hell yeah. You know, I saw Blue Beetle and like, we talked about superhero films before and we were saying how we're kind of over a lot of them. Blue Beetle was one that I saw that, did you see it?
I didn't see it.
I only wanted to go see it because there was Latin people in it. And I genuinely, I said, you know, I want to go see a cast of people that I think represents the way I grew up and the family that I had. And I want to see that on screen. And I saw it twice. I went with my girlfriend, then I also went with my grandparents, and I loved that movie because what it did was it was a little tropey and a little silly, totally, of course. Any movie like that is gonna have that. But it brought Latin people into a world that doesn't exist, right? Like Latin stories in that sense didn't exist. But I don't look at a movie like Blue Beetle as being the only Latin story. And that's the problem. I think a lot of executives see a story like that and see a film like that and go, yep, we need to make more of that.
But to go back to the other question, to go back to the first question, I think that's a topic that only exists here in America.
I think so too. Yeah, totally.
Because you go to Mexico, it's not a Mexican film, it's just a film.
Of course, just a film. Yeah, you know? And I think that's sort
like
of...
Roma is just a film.
It's just a movie, and yeah, of course. And I think that's the thing, is like telling these stories from like a Hispanic American perspective. That's where it gets a little tricky and a little dicey. And I've talked to, you know, black friends of mine or friends from, you know, the Middle East or whatever, and wherever country they're from or whatever culture they're part of, them wanting to tell their story but not wanting to tell the tropey version of that story, wanting to tell a fucking rom-com, and they just happen to be, you know, from a certain country. And like, that can happen. And those are the stories I think we want and we need. And I love that you've been putting an emphasis on that with your films, where like maybe some of them are heavily about, you know, a cause or a certain topic, but some of them are just, hey, here's a little glimpse of a story and this person just happens to be Latino. I think it's great. I think it's a wonderful way for us to start, you know, breaking into film even more in the States again. Yeah, because to say that Latin people are not doing amazing film in the world would be a disservice to all the amazing films in Mexico and Colombia, Argentina, everywhere, you know. Well, what are you working on right now? You working on anything right now? What's your slate look like?
Just writing. I've fallen in love with screenwriting. And
what's your, you told me that you were doing a screenwriting class, right? Or like a workshop?
Yeah.
That's dope. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well and it's going not well. I'm like pulling my hair out on this script because I keep going back and forth as to whether or not the structure of it makes sense. And I'm coming to terms with it that like, it's one of those films that's just not goal oriented. It's just sort of like...
What do you mean by that? You dive in.
Like a regular 3-act structure has a protagonist that goes on a hero's journey, and they have to, you know, they have a goal, and then they face adversity, and then they have to decide whether or not they're going to change to reach their goal. And I'm like, I don't think the subject matter of the film warrants a 3-act structure. Yeah. And I've tried to force it, and every time I do, it just feels disingenuous, and I always like, fuck. You know, like... What do you find is the hardest thing for you when approaching, you know, as a writer? Like, what's the thing that you feel is the hardest for you? Is it like the beginning, like putting pen to paper and the outlining, or do you feel like ideas come to you quickly? It's like the structure of it. The outline is the hardest part for me, and I have to outline, or else I'll just write, and then like I need some kind of structure before I write.
That's dope.
Even though, you know, there's so many things about like Save the Cat or whatever that no one likes and thinks is just like total BS. But for me, before I can break the rules, I have to learn them and master them, and then I can do whatever the heck I want.
I think that's great. Yeah. I find that I do not outline, and I think it's so funny because so many people tell me you should outline more. And every time I do, I feel like I'm doing, I think that's like part of everyone's process. Everyone just has a different process.
For sure.
I find for me, where I succeed most when I'm writing is like just straight up go to my computer, log on to my program, and just start writing things down. And like I'll outline sort of as I go, but I struggle a lot.
Do that.
I struggle a lot to outline. I feel like when I outline, I start losing myself into making the outline as perfect as can be, and that's not the project. Like that's not the point of what an outline is. But in a project I'm working on right now, it's a feature like that I'm writing completely from scratch. The first feature that I wrote is adapted from a play, which is what we're working on right now, and we're in the very early stages of it. But that was very different because you're grabbing those words and just sort of translating them for film and finding a way to tell it. This one that I'm working on next is fully original, and I am outlining a little bit more, and it's proven to be very helpful. But yeah, it's
probably helpful for investors as well.
I think so. Yeah. Well, that's a weird part. Like with our other film, the one that's adapted from a play, what we're doing is we've sort of had to go backwards now because I didn't have an outline for it, and now we're having to like dissect the script to make the outline for our decks and our pitches and all of that. So it's interesting. It like kind of, but I think, it's so hard because there are rules and there's also like no rules, and like there can be, and there's scripts that I know have been created that have just been.
There's been great movies that have like the perfect 3-act structure, and then there's movies that have like nothing
destroy
happens.
that structure, and it's great. Yeah.
Like I don't think Roma, talking about Latin American films, I don't think it has a structure at all.
At all. Yeah. It just feels like a story.
Fantastic
like a moment.
film.
Yeah. One of my favorite films of all time. That's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, it is a beautiful film.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad to hear you're doing a bunch of stuff, man. You
Thank
have
you.
a lot.
And you as
a
well.
lot. Thank you, man. Thank you. I'm excited to see what you do next. You have your short is going to be hopefully playing in some festivals soon.
We'll see.
What's the name of it, if you want to just say?
It's called Oso.
Oso. Yeah.
The trailer's out. It's just figuring out who's going to take it.
Yeah. Well, we're pulling for you, man.
Thank you.
All right. So to end this, we're going to do something we like to do here, a little tradition, some rapid fire questions. So first, what is the best filmmaking advice that you've ever received?
It's all in the screenplay.
It's all in the screenplay. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What do you
elaborate
on it?
If you don't have a good screenplay, you're probably not going to have a good movie. No matter how good the acting is, no matter how good the cinematography is, it's like the Bible for whatever it is that you're getting a bunch of people together to do.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think it's so true.
If
it's engaging on the page, it's going to be engaging visually.
It also helps you make decisions like, should my character walk over here? Should we put the light? Where should the camera be? Well, what's the point of the scene?
Yeah.
Then that dictates sort of the ebb and flow of the.
It's all in the screenplay, man. I'm gonna be thinking about that every time I work on a script. That's great. Okay, this one's a little bit of a hard one, but what are your 3 favorite films of all time?
Of all time.
All time. And if it's not all time, you can choose. Like maybe it's this year, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you feel most comfortable, whatever you can actually think of.
Can I count a trilogy as one movie?
Sure. Yeah.
I would say the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay, that's one.
Still, those movies have affected me so much. Probably because they came out right as I was like 6-7 years old.
Sure. Yeah. These movies are great.
Yeah. Taxi Driver by Scorsese. Mm. I think there's not enough good New York movies. I think there's a lot of films about New York with people who don't understand the monster, who are not shaped by the monster that is New York.
Yeah.
And Scorsese on Paul Schrader's script, just like the cinematography, the acting, that loneliness, like such a big city, there's like so many people here, it's busy all the time, but there's that loneliness and that palpable, like gritty, dirty energy that is New York City.
Yeah.
And that movie just captures it so well.
Beautiful. I love that movie.
It still resonates to this day, probably more so than before. And then I'm debating what my third would be. I have 2, but I'm debating what they would.
Give them both.
It would be Mami by Xavier Dolan and Beautiful by Alejandro Iñárritu.
Okay. Seen Beautiful. I've never seen the other one. What was it?
Mami?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was came out in 2015, and it was shot on a 1:1 aspect ratio.
Oh, crazy. Cool.
And yeah, it affected me and like the power of like music and cinema in a way that I didn't expect before.
Oh, amazing. Cool. All right, since we talked about writing and you being super focused on that, and that's sort of being your, I guess where your head is at. Who's your favorite writer, or maybe director-writer combos? Because that's what you are. You're an amazing director-writer. So like, do you have anybody who you think of?
In terms of screenwriting and directing, Would you count Scorsese as?
I would say so. Yeah.
He has written in.
He doesn't write much,
but he does.
but
I mean,
he
like
does
Killers
write.
of the Flower Moon was.
Yeah, he wrote it with.
I think for me, like, it ebbs and flows. I think to ask like who's your favorite like screenwriter or screen director or whatever, it's just sort of like who's fancying you in the moment. So I would have to say Scorsese right now.
Right now, yeah. You love Killers of the Flower Moon, right?
Yeah, I think it's the best movie of the year.
That's your best picture lock.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I love that movie too.
I've seen it twice.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Man, that's a long one to see twice.
Yeah, that's what, like 7 hours?
Yeah.
Nice.
7 hours of your life given to that movie. Hell yeah, man. Well, dude, thank you so much, man. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Cool.
We good? Yeah.